Hey, what's going on, guys? In this project, we're going to be building a responsive, simple one-page photography website using just HTML5 markup as well as some CSS3, including mobile-first media queries and a little bit of Flexbox for alignment. And this project is absolutely fine for beginners. We're not using any kind of framework. We're not using Bootstrap or anything like that. It's just pure HTML and CSS. Okay, so let's take a look at the project. So it's a fictional company called Acme Photography, and I tried to style it like most of the photography sites you see. They're very minimalistic. They have a lot of white, and then they have a lot of high quality images. And we're actually going to be using Unsplash for some of these free stock images. Now, this part here that you see is always going to be the landing area. So even if this is a smaller height, it's gonna look like this, and as soon as I scroll down, it'll scroll out of that area. And even if it's bigger like this, as soon as I scroll down, it goes out. Okay, so this is the landing area. It's split this way on desktop devices. I'll show you the mobile version in a second. And we just have some text. We have a button that says view work with the little CSS transition for the background, and when I click that, it'll bring us down to the our work. Okay, now we're going to achieve this by using jQuery, and I don't use jQuery for a lot of things, but I think it is good for like animation and smooth scrolling and stuff like that. Now, I could have used a specialized library, a smaller library, but I want to gear this more towards beginners, and I know that a lot of beginners really like jQuery and use jQuery. All right, and I shouldn't even say just beginners, but designers. A lot of designers use jQuery, web designers. So we have some high quality images here. These are going to be completely random from Unsplash. So if I were to reload the page, you'll see they'll change. However, this top one I always want to be this image, so we're going to specify this specific image for the top for the landing. All right, and then we just have 5 of these images with some captions underneath with a title and some dummy text. So you can see we have a bunch of these. And then down at the bottom, we just have a simple footer. We're using the Roboto condensed font, which I think looks really nice and clean. And then we have a nice box shadow around everything. All right, so very, very simple, but I think it looks pretty nice and elegant. I'm not the best designer in the world, but you know, I try to go by some of the other photography sites that I was looking at. So let's make this smaller, and you'll see it has a max width of 900 pixels. As soon as we go below that, it'll start to kind of scale down, and then when it hits 500 pixels, it's going to change to this, and it's going to basically split the opposite way. It's going to split vertically, and I can still click view work, goes down to here. You can see all the images, everything is responsive, looks nice, footer looks good, and that's it. Okay, so that's what we'll be building, guys. I hope you enjoy it, and let's get started. All right, so if you aren't familiar with the term mobile first, it's basically just an approach to design. It's an approach to creating your website or your application UI on small screens first, and then adapting media queries for larger screens and doing, you know, whatever you want to change for larger screens. So we're going to start off with a mobile view, which is basically just the stacked view, so everything on top of each other, and then we'll add media queries to, for instance, split the landing page up horizontally instead of vertically. Okay, so that's basically the gist of what mobile first is, and a lot of frameworks such as Bootstrap 4 have adopted this approach. All right, so I'm using VS Code as my text editor, which I'd highly recommend for just about any kind of programming. And I have a folder called Acme Photography, and it's completely empty. So if you're following along, go ahead and create an index.html file. And we're going to create a folder called CSS. And in that folder, we'll have a file called style.css. We're also going to have a JS folder for our JavaScript, and we're going to have a file in there called main.js. Now, our main.js, all it's going to be is that little piece of jQuery that's going to do the smooth scrolling effect. Okay, we're not going to do any other JavaScript aside from that. So let's go to our index.html. Now, Visual Studio Code has something called Emmet, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, but if you're not, Emmet is basically, it allows us to use shorthands for HTML and CSS, and it allows you to write it much quicker. Or not shorthands, I guess they're abbreviations. And it comes default with VS Code, but if you're using something else like Sublime Text or Atom, or just about any good text editor, you can install Emmet as an extension or a plugin. So I would highly recommend it. I couldn't imagine writing HTML without Emmet these days. So in index HTML, I'm going to do exclamation tab, and Emmet allows us to just generate this basic boilerplate. So it includes the doc type. Okay, it's an HTML5 doc type, and it has the HTML tag with the lang attribute set to English, head tags, body tags. Inside the head, it gives us some meta tags, including the viewport, which is very important for responsive design. You want the width set to the device width, and we have the initial scale set to 1.0. Okay, now before I forget, I just want to include my CSS. So I'm going to put a link tag in here to CSS/style CSS. And then for the title, we're just going to say Acme Photography. I cannot spell and talk at the same time. Now I'm going to save this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this using an extension, a Visual Studio Code extension called Live Server. And if you want that, you can click on this icon and search for Live Server and just click the green install button. And what this does is it allows us to open our HTML file on a dev server on our local host, and it also has auto load, or auto reload, so that when we save something, it will reload. We don't have to actually go up and click the reload button. So it's very helpful in that aspect. I would suggest it, but again, it's not needed. You can just open up your HTML file, but you will have to reload after you make your changes. So I'm going to open it with Live Server by either right-clicking, or on a Mac, Control-click and open with Live Server. And it's just going to be a blank page. Okay, you can see our title at the top, but our body is completely empty. Now, again, I know a lot of you know how to use Emmet, you know what it is, but for those of you that don't, I do have a tutorial on my channel on Emmet where I go in depth, but just to show you a couple things. So let's say we wanted an H1 tag. We could do H1 and hit tab. That'll give us the beginning and ending tag. If we wanted an H1 with, let's say, a class of test, we could do .test tab. That'll give us a class. If we wanted an ID, we could do hash test tab, and that will give us an ID. Now, if we want a div with any of those, we don't even have to put the word div or the tag div. We can just simply do ID test tab. That'll give us a div with the ID of test. Same with class, and that will give us a div with the class of test. All right, so you'll see me do this throughout this tutorial, and I just wanted to explain, how I'm doing that. So we want to surround everything except the footer inside of a main tag. For some reason, main doesn't work with Emmet for me. So I'm just going to put the actual tag in here. So in the main tag, and this is an HTML5 semantic tag, and it's basically, it's where you want to put your main content. All right, now in here, we're going to have a div with the ID of landing. Okay, now I'm going to keep the finished product open just so you can kind of see what's what. This div with the ID of landing is this entire thing, so both of these sections right here. And then I'm going to split it up into this, which will be a div with the ID of landing text, and this will have a div with the ID of landing image. So let's go in here and let's put another div with the ID of landing text, and then I also want to just put an ID of landing text inner as well, and then that's where this content is going to go. So the H1, which is going to be Acme Photography, and then underneath will be an H2, and we're going to say beautiful natural photography. Okay, now this here looks like a button, but it's actually a link. We're just going to format it as a button within CSS. So let's put an A tag. I'm going to give it a class of BTN. That's what I'm going to use to style it later on. And this is going to go to hash or number sign or sharp, whatever the hell you want to call this thing. And it's going to go to images. Okay, and what this will do is it'll point to an element that has the ID of images, which we're going to create later on. Okay, or in a few minutes. And then I'm also going to add an ID to this link because we need to grab onto it from within jQuery so that we can add the smooth scrolling. And I'm going to use an ID for that. So I'm just going to call this view-work. And then for the text of the link or the button, whatever you want to call it, is going to be view work. So if I save this and we look at our version, it looks absolutely horrendous, but we have no CSS yet. So it's going to look horrible until we add our CSS. And the way that I like to do things is do all of the HTML first and then start to style it. I never got into doing, part of the HTML, styling that, doing the other part and styling that. I don't do that. So we'll just do all of the HTML. So we have the landing, we have the landing text inner. Now this part is going to be a div with the ID of landing image, and that's going to go right under landing text. Okay, still within the landing div. So let's say ID landing image. And we're not going to put anything in here because this is actually a background image. So that means that we have to insert this in the CSS, not inline in the HTML. All right, and that's pretty much it for the landing. So I'm just going to put a comment right here and say landing area. And we want to go under that div, still within the main tag, and that's where we're going to put our images div. Oops. Okay, so the images div is going to include from here, so that this little heading, as well as all of the images and captions. So let's do that. So we're going to go in here and let's add the header. So the header is actually going to have an ID of header, and it's going to be an H2, and it's just going to say our work. Save that, and then we're going to go under the header div, and let's put the let's do the images. So we want to put an image tag here with a source. Now these images are coming from Unsplash, which is a great service, free service that gives you really high quality free stock images. And you can just include URLs to generate random images. Let's see, we want to go down, and this is source.unsplash.com, by the way. So you can get like images from a collection, you can get a fixed daily or weekly photo. You can also do random search terms, and that's what we're going to do for these nature images. And you can see they're actually using nature water as a search term. So that's exactly what I want for the first one. So I'm just going to copy this, and we're going to go back and put that in the source. Now, since this is a remote image and it's not on your local machine, it might be a little slow loading. If you want, you can download the image. You could just go to this in your URL, download it, and include it in your file structure if you want. But I'm not going to do that. All right. So if I were to save this, you'll see that the image will show. Now it's going to go out of the screen. It's not going to be fixed in the browser. We're going to do that within the CSS. So don't worry about that yet. Now each image is going to have a caption. So as you can see here, each image has a little caption. So directly under the image tag, let's put a class of caption. All right, now if you're new to HTML and you don't really understand the difference between ID and class, there's no technical difference, like functionality difference, but there's a semantic difference. So basically an ID is unique. So for instance, we're not going to have another div with the ID of images anywhere. We're not going to have another landing ID or landing text. These are all unique. Caption, however, we're going to have a bunch of these. So that's why I'm using a class for caption. Okay, so just remember IDs should be unique. And not everyone follows that, but that's basically the best practice. So captions will have an H3, we'll say photo 1, and then a paragraph. And with Emmet, we can say lorem 10 tab, and that'll give us 10 words of dummy text. So I'll save that. And now under the image, you can see we have this little caption. So now we're going to have 5 of these. So I'm going to copy the whole image tag and the paragraph. I'm sorry, the image tag and the caption div. Okay. And then we're going to go underneath. We're going to do 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to have 5 of these. And then we don't want to keep the same URL because these will all be the same image. So I'm going to change the second one here to nature trees. Change this one to flowers. This will be animals. So you can basically just put any search term here and it will find an image that relates to it. Unsplash is a really, really good service, has a really nice API to work with as well. And then here, let's do clouds. Okay, and then we'll just change the captions. So this will be, well, that will stay photo 1. The second one will be photo 2. And then we'll do photo 3, 4, and 5. All right, so we'll save that. Like I said, it might take a second to load. It depends on your connection, but you can download these and include them locally if you want. So now we have 5 images with 5 captions. All right, so that's it for the entire images div. Now what we want to do, actually that's it for the whole main area. So we want to go under main, and now we're going to put the footer. So we're going to use an HTML5 footer tag, and inside the footer we'll have an H3, and we're just going to say get in touch and put a paragraph, and let's say email or call us to set up a consult. Okay, so then we'll put another paragraph and we'll say email. We're going to put the email inside of strong tags, and I'm just going to say contact@acmephotos.test, which I'm sure is not a real email address. And then paragraph, we'll do phone. Put in a strong tag here, and the phone will do, let's say 617-555-5555. All right, so that should do it. Let's save and take a look at the footer. And I know all this looks very, very ugly, but we'll fix that. And the last thing we want to do in this HTML files is include our script. Now, our script is going to use jQuery, so we need to include jQuery as well. So what I'm going to do is open up another browser here, and we want to go to code.jquery.com. And we want to grab version 3. Now, you do not want to grab the slim version, because the whole reason we're using jQuery is for the animate method, or the animate function, and the slim version does not include it, so you'll get an error and it won't work. So we're going to grab the minified version or the uncompressed and save this, the whole script tag. All right, then we'll go back to our HTML, and we're going to paste this right above the ending body tag. And then right below that, we're going to put our script tag. So this should have a source attribute pointing to js/main.js. And save. And that's it for our HTML. That's done. So let's move on to our style.css file. And we're going to be using a font called, or font family called Roboto Condensed, okay, which isn't included with your browser by default, so we have to get it from Google Fonts. So let's head over to fonts.google.com. You can actually put the query in here as well, but if you don't want to do that, if you go to fontsgoogle.com and just search for Roboto, it'll show up here. So we want the condensed. We're going to click the plus. You'll see this pop up down here. If you click that, this will show you how to implement it. You can either put it in a link tag in your HTML, or what we're going to do is use the import in our style sheet. So I'm just going to copy this import, and let's go back to our style sheet and paste that in. And now we're going to say body. Okay, so for our body, we're going to go ahead and let's go back to that page. And we can now use this as a font family. So we can say Roboto Condensed Sans Serif. So let's throw that in there. And now our whole website, if I save it, should be that font. And you can see that it's changed. If we go to the top here, you can see everything is that font. All right, I also want to just take away any margin from the bottom. So I'm going to say margin 0. We're going to set a background color of a hexadecimal value of EEE, which is a very light gray, and then just set the height to auto. Okay, so that's our body styles. So next, let's work on the H1, so this Acme photography right here. And I'm just going to style the H1 because it's the only one here. If you had other H1s, you'd want to target this, like you'd want to say maybe landing H1 or something like that, but I'm just going to use just H1 here. And let's say font weight. So font weight can take, you know, bold and stuff like that, but it can also take a number. I'm going to put 400. And then the font size, we're going to use 2 rem. Now, I'm sorry, 2.5 rem. Now, if you don't know what rem units are, I have a video on rem and em units on my YouTube channel if you really want to go in depth. But basically, a rem unit, if you say 1 rem, that's going to be whatever the core HTML tag's font size is times 1, okay? And the HTML font size by default is going to be 16 pixels. So 1 rem is going to equal 16 pixels. 2 rems is going to equal 16 pixels times 2, which would be 32. And then 2.5 rem, like we're using, is going to be 16 pixels times 2.5, which would be 40 pixels. And if we go and we open up our Chrome tools over here, I don't want it here, geez, let's put it down here. And I go to Elements, and we select, let's go to Main, Landing, Landing Text, Landing Image, and we want to hover, we want to click on the H1, and then down here in the CSS, you'll see the, wait a minute, oh, I didn't save this, hold on, let me save this first. And now you'll see H1 has 2.5 rem. Now if we go down more, or let's actually click on computed. It's hard on a small screen, but you can see the computed font size is 40 pixels. Okay, so it took the initial 16 pixels of the HTML and then times it by 2.5 and got 40 pixels. If I were to change this to just 2 rem and save, now you'll see right here, now it's 32. If I put it to 1 rem, and save, 16 pixels. All right, now I don't want to go too far into this. Like I said, I do have a video on this, but I'm going to put this back to 2.5. And using rem or em units, it just makes everything more responsive. And if we were to go into the settings of Chrome and say we want the text to be large, it would actually change the text. It wouldn't do that if we use fixed pixels. So what else do we want to do to the H1? We want to make it all uppercase, even if the actual text is not. So for that we can use text transform and say uppercase. And if I save that, now you'll see this is all uppercase. And then I just want to take the margin away. So we'll say margin 0 and save. All right, so now let's do the H2, which is the thing below it. Actually, the H2 is that, and also the caption. Wait, is the caption titles H2s? Or are they H3s? No, they're H3s. The our work is also an H2 though. So it's going to style both of those, and that's fine. So let's say H2, and let's make the font weight 400. Let's make the font size, this time I'm going to do 1.2 rem, so it'll be 1.2, 16 pixels times 1.2. And then for text transform, I want to do capitalize, which will just make the first letter of each word capitalized. And then let's take the margin away and save, and there we go. Okay, so it still looks like crap, but don't worry. Now the images, you can see, are just horrible. They're just full size, they go off screen. What we can do to contain these images is add the IMG tag, so any IMG element on the page we want to display as a block level element, and then we want to say we want the width to be 100% of its container. So if I save that, now you'll see the images shrink down because they're now 100% of the container, which is basically the browser window. All right, so now we want to deal with the main element. So we'll say main, and I'm going to set a max width on the main to 900 pixels. And we want to set a margin of auto so that it's in the middle. Now if I save this, we won't see any difference now, but if we were to make this bigger, you'll see it ends at 900 pixels. It's also pushed to the middle because of the margin auto. Now I'm going to leave it like this for a second because I want to add the box shadow. which is the, the drop shadow around the whole thing. So for that, we're going to say box shadow, and we're going to set, now there's a few different values. I'm not going to go deep into this, but it's basically the horizontal offset, the vertical offset, the blur, and the color. So we want to say 30 pixels for the horizontal offset, 0, and then for the blur, we'll say 40 pixels, and then the color is going to be an RGBA value. So that's red, green, blue, alpha. So it takes 4 things. It takes the red value, and I want this to be black, so it'll be 0 for red, 0 for green, 0 for blue, and then the alpha, which is basically like the transparency or the opacity, is going to be 0.1. I want it to be a very light color, or I'm sorry, very light, whatever. I don't know the word for it. Transparency. And then for the bottom and right or top, we want to do negative 30 pixels. Let's see, we want to do 0 pixels and 40 pixels. And then the color is going to be RGBA. It's going to be the same value as this one. So if we save that, now you can see that there is a shadow around the box. Okay, it's on the sides and on the bottom. Now, if you wanted this darker, you could increase this, let's say 0.4, and save, and now you can see it's darker. So if you want to do that, you can, but I'm going to keep it at 0.1, I think. Yeah. All right, so that's it for the main. Now let's do the landing stuff. So up here, this is the landing right here. And I'm just going to make this smaller again. So for the actual landing div, it's not much. I just want to add a background of white. Okay, that's for the landing div itself, but we have a bunch of stuff we want to do for the landing text and the landing image. So let's start with the landing text. Now, I want to properly align everything, so we're actually going to use Flexbox here. I do have a crash course on Flexbox, which if you're learning HTML, CSS right now, I would definitely suggest watching that and checking that out. But basically, we can say display, and we can display as flex. Okay, I'm going to save that, and you can see that the landing now has a white background. Whoops, this should be ID. There we go. All right, so we'll say display flex, and then for the flex property, basically this is going to be, it takes in 3 things: flex grow, flex shrink, and the basically the width, which we're going to say 40 VW. Now VW is viewport widths. Okay, now let me just save this real quick, and we're not really going to see any difference here yet. But for viewport heights, for VH, and viewport widths, VW, you can think of it as slices, and I've said this in quite a few videos. If the height had 100 slices and we set something to 100 VH, so 100 viewport heights, it would take up the whole thing. Okay, and that's what we're going to do with the desktop version. We want the landing to be 100 viewport heights. If you wanted it to take half the screen, you would do 50 VH. Okay, if you wanted it to take half the width, you would do 50 VW, viewport widths. We're doing 40 VW here. Okay, if you wanted the whole thing, you'd do 100 VW. So what we want to do is add a height to this as well. So let's say height, and we're going to add a height of 50 VH. So 50 viewport heights, and save. All right, and now notice that the landing text takes up 50% of the screen, and it doesn't matter, even if we make this shorter, it's still going to be 50%, or I should say 50 viewport heights. Now we want to align the stuff inside this landing text. So since we use Flexbox, we can use like justify content, and we'll say we want to justify it to the center. If I save that, that's going to align it horizontally to the center. Now we also want to align it vertically to the center. So for that, we can use align dash items and say center, and save, and now it's aligned to the middle. All right, so using Flexbox like this is easier than, I wouldn't say easier, but it's more efficient, it's cleaner than using paddings and stuff like that to put it down in the middle. So we also want to add text align center because we want the actual text to be centered. So text align center, save that, moves everything to the center. And I want to just add a little bit of padding on the left and right. So I'm going to say padding right, and I'm going to do 15 pixels. Actually, no, let's not do pixels. Let's do 1 rem. And padding left, 1 rem. So that's actually going to be 16 pixels. All right, now that's pretty much it for the actual landing text div itself. For the H2 here, this beautiful natural photography, I want that to be a lighter color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just say landing dash text, and we want to target the H2 that's inside of it, and then change the color to a hexadecimal of 888, which is a gray. So if I save that, now you'll see that changes to that color. All right, so let's work on the button. Okay, this right here, which is just a link right now. So we're going to go down and add the class of BTN because that's what we called it, and we're going to add a bunch of padding to it. So let's say 0.5 rem. So that's going to be top and bottom. Left and right is going to be 2 rem. Okay, so it's going to be 8 pixels by 32. Now let's add a border around this. So we're going to say border 1 pixel, and let's see, for the color we're going to do CCC, which is a light gray, and solid border. So if I save this, you'll see that the padding is here, the border, it kind of runs into the top. That's because it's a link, and links are inline elements, so they don't knock on to the next line. We want to display this as an inline block. So let's say display inline dash block and save, and now you'll see it's now not crammed up against that. But I do want to move it down a little more, so I'm going to add a margin to it of 2 rem on the top. So we'll just go like that, 2 rem top. Yeah, all right. We also want the border to be rounded, so for that we add border radius, and we're going to do radius of 50 pixels. Save that. Okay. And don't worry about it. It's going to be bigger. The button will be bigger when it's on a larger screen. But like I said, we're doing mobile first. And on mobile, I want the button to be smaller. We also want to take away that ugly underline. So we're going to use text decoration none. Save that. Let's change the color as well from that ugly blue. I don't know why they use that blue by default. We're going to change it to 333, which is almost black. And we also want to add a transition to the background. No, actually, before we do that, let's add the hover state. So we'll say btn : hover, and we want to just basically change the background. So background to say F4 3 times, which is a light gray. So now if I hover over it, it turns gray, but I want it to have that transition effect, like that slow kind of like fade in. So what we'll do is we'll add on a transition property and say that the property we want to transition is the background. Okay, and we want it to be, the length will say 500 milliseconds, which is a half a second, and we want it to ease in. Okay, so we'll save that, and now when I hover over it, you'll see that it kind of fades in. It's not just a sudden change. And you can change the time here if you want as well. All right, so I think that should be it for the entire this part here, the landing text. Now let's do the landing image. So let's go down. Actually, I'm going to go above the button. So right here, landing image. So the landing image is going to be a fixed image. Now I'm going to pull Unsplash back up. And if you go down to right here, you can actually use a specific photo, and all you have to do is include the ID of that photo. So I'm going to copy this. I don't even want the size. I just want up to this point. So I'm going to grab that, and I'm going to paste that into background URL. But I don't want this image. Okay, so I want to find the ID for the image that I want, which I don't remember what I searched for. Okay, now to search the images, we're going to just go to unsplash.com, not source, Unsplash. And I can't remember what I searched for. Photography? Let's see. It was a Samsung camera. And it was like a long photo. Maybe it wasn't photography, because I don't think I went down this far. I wonder if we search for Samsung. No. Oh yeah, here it is. So basically, if I click this, in the URL you see the ID. I just want to grab that. So I'm going to Control C, I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to go back to my HTML. Or I'm sorry, my CSS, and paste that in right here, and then that will give us that specific image. Okay, all the other ones are going to change. They're just random depending on the category, but this one will be fixed. Now, if I save it, we're not going to see it yet because we didn't add any height or anything to it. So let's go ahead and add some stuff here. We're going to add a background, just some other background properties. So background position is going to be center. We want this to be centered. The background size is going to be set to cover. Okay. We want the whole thing to show. We don't want it to repeat, so we want to say background repeat set to no repeat. And for the height, we're going to set that to 50 VH. Because we want it to take up 50 viewport heights, so basically the other half of that the text is taking up. And for flex, we're going to set this to 0, and 0 and 1 is just the default for the flex grow and the flex shrink, and then we'll set it to 60 viewport width, and then just margin 0. Okay, we'll save that. And there we go. So now the image takes up 50 viewport heights. This takes up 50 viewport heights. And I think that should do it for at least for the landing. So now let's move on to, let's see. We have the header. I guess, yeah, we'll do the header. So we'll go down here, add in our header ID, and we want to style the H2. Actually, let's do the header first. So we're going to do the header, and then we have some stuff that I want to do to the H2 as well that's in the header. So for the header, we're going to display, I'm sorry, we're not going to do display. We're going to just add some padding. So I'm going to do, let's do 1.5 rem. Save that, so you can see that padding was added. I'm going to text align to the center. Okay. We're going to add a background, and let's do 333, so dark gray, almost black. We want to make sure we make the text white as well. So we'll save that. Good. Now for the H2 itself, we want to well, first of all, let me show you what I'm going to do. I want a dotted border on each side, so I'm going to do border dash left, and let's do dotted. That'll be the style. 1 pixel will be the width, and white will be the color. All right, and we're going to want to do this. Whoops. We're going to want to do this for the right as well. So let's say border right. Same thing. Now if I save, notice the borders are way over here, and I don't want it. I won't want that. I want them closer. So instead of being displayed as a block, which H2s are by default, I want to display as an inline block. Now if I save that, you'll see the borders go in, but obviously that's too close, so we're just going to add some padding to the H2 on the right and left. So let's say padding right, we'll say 1 rem, padding left, 1 rem, and save, and there we go. So that's the header. Now let's do the captions. So notice the captions are right up against the side here. I'm going to add some padding to those. So caption is a class. So caption, and let's do padding. And we'll say, let's do 0.8 rems. And then I want to align everything to the center. All right, so there's our captions. Good. So I think the last thing to do here, as far as the mobile version, is the footer. Okay, so let's go down here. We'll style the footer directly. We want a text align to the center. And we want some padding. So I'm going to say 2 rem top and bottom, 1 rem left and right. We'll say margin auto to move everything to the middle, and then the color of the text is going to be 333. So we'll save that. Now the H3 I want to be much bigger, so I'm going to say footer H3, and we're going to set the font size to 3 rem. So it'll be 16 pixels times 3, and let's say margin bottom will be 0, and save. And there it is. All right, so that is the mobile version. If I reload, these images down here will change too. Okay, but you'll see this one's always going to be this image. Now let's make this bigger. So this isn't really what I want for bigger screens. Okay, we have the mobile set, but for bigger screens, I want this split up. So it's not going to take much work to do that. All we really want to do is display the landing div as a flex box, because when you display something as flex, it'll automatically turn into a flex row, which will go horizontal instead of vertically. All right, so what we'll do is add a media query. So what am I doing? That's not right. So we'll say screen sizes 500 pixels and up. So to do a media query, if for those of you that have never done them, we do an @ symbol and then media, and it's basically formatted like a function, and it takes in a parameter of either a min width or a max width. Now since this is mobile first, we're going to say min width of 500 pixels. So basically, this whatever CSS we put in here is only going to kick in if it's above 500 pixels when we say min width. If we said max width, it would be anything under 500 pixels. And what we're going to do is take the landing, okay, the entire landing div, and we want to display as flex. And I'm going to save that, and let's check it out, and you can see that it's now displayed this way. So when I hit under 500, it'll go back to the original. Now let's take care of the height. So I'm going to set the landing to the height of 100% and save. And notice that it still doesn't take up the whole thing. What we want to do is set the landing text, which is this whole block here, and the landing image to 100 VH, viewport heights. So remember the slices, so we have 100 slices. We want it to take up all of those 100. So let's add landing text and say we want the height to be 100 VH. And then we'll take the landing image and say we want the height to be 100 VH. Let's save, and there we go. So now no matter how tall or short this is, it takes up 100 viewport heights, because that doesn't change. It's not a fixed pixel. All right, now the only thing that I want to do The only thing left is this button. I want it to be bigger on screens that are 700 pixels or higher. Okay, not 500, but 700, so around here or so. So what we'll do is add one more media query. So we'll say screens or screen sizes, sorry about that traffic. Screen sizes 700 pixels and up. And we're going to do media. Let me just move this up for you guys. So media, and then we want min width of 700 pixels. And I'm just going to take the button class, and I'm not going to, all I'm going to do is add extra padding. So I'm going to say padding is going to be 1 rem on the top and bottom and 3 rem on the left and right, which initially was what? Let's see, button, we had 0.5 and 2 rem. So now we're just upping the padding, which will make it look bigger. So let's save. And now if we go back, you'll see that it's bigger, but when we get to 700, which is right there, it shrinks down. Okay, and it's still small on small devices, on mobile devices, or I should say really small mobile devices like cell phones. Because tablets, I mean, if it was a tablet, it would probably be like right here, something like that. All right, so I think that's it, guys. Actually, no, it's not. I almost forgot the jQuery. So we want this button to actually, I mean, it goes down to our work by default. That's just default HTML behavior, but we want that smooth scrolling. So let's add that. I almost forgot. So let's go to main.js, and I'm just going to say animate. We'll say smooth scroll. And what we'll do is we'll use jQuery to grab onto the ID of view work. Remember, we added that ID to our button. And then we're going to say .on and then an event, so click. So when that's clicked, we're going to run a function. And in this function, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable called images. And we're going to set this to jQuery ID of images, and we want to get the position. Whoops, we want to do dot position, and we want the top. Okay, dot position top. And then to animate this, we want to use jQuery. What am I doing? We want to use jQuery, and in here we want to put this on the HTML and body. And this is a very common snippet, what I'm doing here. You'll find this all over the place. And we're going to say dot animate. And animate will take in this object where we want to say scroll top. So basically we want it to scroll from the top image to images. Okay, remember this images is this variable here. And then this takes in one more parameter, which is going to be the time it takes. So we're going to say 900. Okay, it's milliseconds. So 900 milliseconds to scroll. So let's save that. And you'll see that it changed up a little bit as far as indentation. That's because I'm using the Prettier extension for VS Code. Don't worry about that. It's the same code. It's just they just put some spaces and stuff. So let's go ahead and try this. So we come to the site, we hit view work, and there we go. It scrolls down to our work. All right, nice and smooth. So that's it. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you are not subscribed and you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing. Please consider supporting me on Patreon if you can. And that's it. So I will see you next time.